Well, hello, and welcome back to There You Go with Bryan. I just happened to be at one of the oldest cemeteries in Chicago today. It's Graceland Cemetery. Let's check it out.
It's so easy to get sucked into all of these. I mean, seriously, come on. Look at that. I don't have time to research everything. This is Linda G. and Christopher D. I'm guessing he was probably a physician. The manuals, right there, with a very artistic, very beautiful guardian angel watching over them here. And just over here, they're looking out over the lake, right over there. That's the Graceland Memorial Cemetery Lake. And sometimes I get attracted to some of these spots where it's like I don't even necessarily know much about the person until I research them a little bit, but what a cool little memorial here to a guy with possibly one of the cooler names I've ever seen, Tigerman, or Tigerman, however you say that, but we can just call him Stanley Tigerman. He was one of the most groundbreaking architects in the city of Chicago in the postmodern style. He was known around the world for designing the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center in Skokie, Illinois. And one of the last things that he did was the chapel at the Pacific Gardens Mission in Chicago. But he worked on all sorts of kind of postmodern, a lot of glass and steel. He also did a lot of art exhibits as well, something involving showing the Titanic sinking. Anyway, seems like an interesting fellow. And his wife was a architect as well. Her name is Margaret. I don't know if that shows up. Hopefully it does. That's Margaret. But Margaret is she's still with us. So, you know, and hopefully she'll be with us for many years to come. But I'm guessing these are probably the cremains of Stanley. What an interesting way to display those. He was born on the 20th of September, 1930. Stanley Tigerman. World-class architect.
This is Mies van der Rohe. He's considered to be the father of modern architecture. He was born in Germany, but came to America in the 1930s when the Nazis came to power. He had developed a new style of architecture that broke away from traditionalism. He started working with industrial materials such as steel and plate glass, mostly building on a grid system that, while it first appeared on the scene, was very striking. Some people, as time went on, found it to be soulless and unimaginative. This was the person who Stanley Tigerman rebelled against. Stanley Tigerman was a legendary Chicago architect, known for his rebellious and ironic projects. That was one of the key words that he lived by, ironic. He thought that modern architecture was just a little bit too stuffy, and he wanted to introduce humor and irony into the architecture. He designed many projects. Over 200 were realized. He wrote numerous texts and was an outstanding teacher that included being the director of the University of Illinois at Chicago's School of Architecture from 1985 until 1993. Let's take a look at some of his best work. This one's called The Black Barn at Frog Hollow in Barron Springs, Michigan. This was built in 1974. It's deceptively unusual. Yes, it is a barn, but if you look at the small details, you'll see it's got modern windows, and most barns in this area were painted red or white. While it is striking, it looks strangely out of place in this idyllic setting, almost as if it's fallen out of the sky to land in this field. This is the Illinois Regional Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. It was built by Tigerman in 1976. Notice the waves on the side of the building and the unusual use of color. It definitely makes it stand out. There's Stanley's sense of irony. It's a simple garage. It could have just been a square building, looking very bland. But his use of color and the image of an automobile on the side of the building makes it whimsical. Stanley believed that one of the main purposes of an architect is to bring pleasure to people. Part of that was working with different lines than you might normally expect to see. Something just a little bit out of the normal, but not so much that it would seem uncomfortable to look at. This is the Anti-Cruelty Society in Chicago. It was built in 1982. This is what would otherwise be just a regular door, but not with Stanley Tigerman's design. This is in Venice, and it was built in 1980. Here we have Daisy House at Porter Beach, Indiana. Stanley Tigerman said Mies van der Rohe believed that architecture is the will of an epic translated into space. On the other hand, an architect often tells the client or society, "Come this way, I'll show you a better way." So sometimes architecture mirrors the society, and sometimes it leads the way. So one is torn between the two all the time. This is a very interesting building. It's the South Park building at 60 East Lake Street in Chicago. It was built in 1986. This is how it developed from the sketch to the actual building. Notice the awnings are actually the tires of a car. The interesting lines. The whimsical use of color. And this is the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Educational Center in Skokie, Illinois. It's one of the last projects that Stanley worked on. It was built in 2009. And this was where Stanley lived, Lakeside Residence, Michigan. This was built in 1984. Stanley Tigerman was married 3 times. He had a son and daughter from his first marriage, and in 1979, he married his 3rd wife, Margaret McCurry, who was also a fellow architect. They had a country home in Michigan, but their main residence was at 900 North Lakeshore Drive. It's an apartment complex, and it was designed by Mies van der Rohe, of all people. It's right on the lakefront in Chicago. And that's where he died on June 3rd, 2019, at the age of 88. Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of There You Go with Bryan. If you like this program and would like to support it, please click the Venmo or Patreon link below. As always, we appreciate you tuning in, and we look forward to spending time with you next time on There You Go with Bryan.